Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Catherine and I'm a small business owner from Denmark. I run a small Fairycore, whimsical jewelry business. And recently I got this question from one of my friends on TikTok, like on how I embrace my inner fairy or channel my inner fairy in like my work with my business, because she thought that everything I do is kind of fairy coded and you can feel that kind of vibe or something. At least that was what she said. And yeah, I thought it was a really interesting question and I decided to kind of answer it with a video. In this video, I'm going to take you through different little things you can do in your daily life to channel your inner fairy and build a stronger connection to your imagination and just your, like, how you view your daily life. Like, add a bit of magic to it in a way. And before we start doing that, I think it will make sense if I talk a bit about like why and how my journey with fairies started. So ever since I can remember, I've been really fascinated by fairy tales and fairies, magical creatures and stories, stuff like that. And I especially had a phase where I was really obsessed with fairies, and I think that phase started when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and it ended when I became a teenager, I think somewhere around there. But before I became a teenager and started going through all of that, I remember I collected all of these little fairy figurines. Like, I recently got this one, like exactly like this one, that style, that same vibe. I had a lot of those, and I was obsessed with crystals as well. I had a little crystal collection, and just like anything that was whimsical. Yeah, also this little dragon. I had this one as well. I had him on display like I do now, but I'm so glad I didn't throw him away or put him away somewhere where I couldn't find him again. But yeah, so what was I saying? Yeah, and I was really a whimsical little kid. I like to dress up and I like to read fairy tale books and go on little adventures in the forest, build fairy houses, play with fairy figures, and yeah, all of fun stuff like that. But I think that all kind of came to an end when I had my teenage years, maybe when I was about 13 or something, like maybe a bit older actually. I held on to it for quite a while, but then I started feeling like it was cringe and stupid, and actually I think I just didn't want to be bothered anymore. I wanted to be basic so no one would think I was weird. I was sick of being always like the weird kid, the loser and stuff like that. It was just, I was just sick of it. I just wanted to be left alone, be normal or whatever you say. And yeah, I kept that going for a while actually. I think until my like mid-20s, I started coming back to my true self, my inner self, the whimsical self that was there all along. And it came really naturally to me. It felt like in some ways it felt like I never left, if you know what I mean. And yeah, now I can just be my true self, like just live in that little fairy tale world again. And that's actually what I'm doing through my small business, making Fairycore jewelry, just like channeling my inner whimsy. And that's been really good for me. So I think through this video as well, I hope that I can maybe help others do the same thing and kind of like remove the kind of cringe you may feel about liking fairies. I mean, life's too short to really care about not liking something just because other people think you're weird. I mean, it's your life and you should live life the way you want to. And it might be really hard, especially if you live in a really narrow-minded community, or like you haven't moved out of your childhood home yet or something else. We're all in different situations all around the world, but if you really want to live a life where you're happy, then you kind of have to follow your inner passions, like your inner whimsy, or I don't know how to call it, just be yourself. But enough about that. So let me tell you a bit about what we're going to do. So I brainstormed a few things that I could show you guys and challenge you guys with. And yeah, so basically it's about doing these little things in your everyday life that kind of bring you closer to that fairy mindset or whatever. I don't even know what to call it, but like for example, we'll go on a mindful walk where we'll try to stimulate our imagination in a more whimsical way, like be more mindful when walking in nature. Other than that, I'll show you other things you can do, little rituals and new habits you can make, and ways of adding more whimsical objects to your everyday life, both in the things you wear and the things you have in your home. Well, I think that's enough introduction. I hope you enjoy this video and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write a list of all the whimsical kind of fairycore things we did as a child, and just sit down and try to kind of think back and remember what you did and how that made you feel. Yeah, and just write your list. It might be a short list, it might be a longer list, but just write down whatever comes into your mind. And you might want to pause the video here and do it with me, or you can do it after you've watched the video. But I think that it's really important that you do this, because this will really help you get back into that inner fairy that you're looking for. So my list is done now. Your list might look similar to mine or completely different. It's all about your own experience. And now what we're going to do is we are going to make a little brainstorm on how we can bring this back into our adult lives. Some of the things might be pretty self-explanatory, but other things we're going to have to think a bit outside of the box. We're going to have to kind of translate them into things we can do in our adult lives that are also whimsical, but in a different way perhaps. And I'm writing down my list, some of the things we will do in this video, and some of the things I'm exploring on my own. And as for me, there will be things that you need to explore on your own as well, that are just unique to what you want to do. Yeah, so this is what my list looks like. You might want to pause so you can read them all. But yeah, again, your list might look totally different or similar. Like, it should look exactly how you want it to look. Yeah, but let's dive into this experience. One thing you can do that I think is very important is to go for a mindful walk in nature. I'm just going to go in the little valley that I have basically in my backyard. It doesn't really matter that much. It can be a forest, it can be a park. Like, it can just be somewhere near you where there's trees and grass and maybe a bit of variation in the landscape.
And the important thing of this mindful walk is to be mindful and also open ourselves up to sensory impressions. For example, you have to focus on your breath, like taking nice deep breaths. And when you take these deep breaths, I want you to notice the freshness or the scent in the air. Try to listen to the sounds around you. Maybe it's windy or birds are singing, leaves are rustling on the ground, there's wind in the trees. I just want you to notice what you hear around you. And I also want you to open your eyes to things you might not notice when you're not really on a mindful walk, but you're just on a walk. There's a difference between just going on a walk and going on a mindful walk and really taking in the scenery, really being a part of the landscape in a way. So I want you to notice the space around you, notice the plants, notice the trees, and notice the animals around you if there are any. And just really be aware of your surroundings as you go on this walk. And another thing I like to do is that I like to, for example, if I see something I think is really looks like something out of a fairy tale, for example, this mossy old tree, I think this tree is a perfect example of what I think looks like a fairy tale tree. And I like to look at trees like these and imagine a little fairy living in the hole you see in the tree trunk, or a squirrel living there, some creatures living there. And I think to have these, allow yourselves to kind of have these daydreams is for me also one of the ways that I've stayed in touch with my inner whimsy over the years. On this walk, I also want you to be aware of the things on the ground as well. Maybe there's a cool rock or something that you want to pick up and look at. Maybe you want to put it in your pocket. At least I remember when I was a kid, I would collect all these little things, put them in my pocket, and this is a habit I've grown into again. It's just a delightful little thing to do, and it feels really whimsical. And yeah, I try to, on this walk, I tried to find some things, maybe some acorns, but yeah, I ended up just finding rotten acorns, and it wasn't that interesting. I only ended up finding a few things that I wanted to take home in my pocket. But it's the little things like this that can help you get into that fairy whimsical mindset again. And on your first mindful walk, you might not feel as much because it's actually difficult to let yourself feel these things, and maybe you don't feel a lot. Maybe it's difficult to go on this walk. Maybe it didn't make a lot of sense, but I want you to keep going on these walks, maybe once a week, and whenever you can find the time. It doesn't have to be a long walk. The important thing is that you're mindful on this walk, that you take in the scenery around you and let yourself be part of it. And I think if you keep going on these walks, you will find that your mindset will start to shift, that perhaps your imagination feels more alive, and that you will feel closer to that whimsical side in you. Another thing I think you should try is to make yourself a whimsical little meal. And this meal can be anything. It can be a cake, it can be a salad, it can be anything. But to make it whimsical, for example, if you're making a salad, try adding some fruits or maybe berries to the salad. And yeah, just making something that you feel like maybe a fairy would eat this, whatever your idea of that would be. I chose to make these banana pancakes. And I think pancakes for me is a very indulgent whimsical meal, and I always put syrup and jam, and if I have berries, I put berries on them. I feel like Like that's something fairies would love, just something very sugary, like put syrup on everything. Yeah, and I want you to just like indulge in this meal, have a cozy little time by yourself and just enjoy the sweetness or the flavors, or just feel a bit whimsical eating your meal. Like for me, like making these little meals for myself, it's really self-love. Yeah, and like maybe do this once a week, have a little indulgent meal where you're like more mindful when you're eating it, more appreciative of this meal, and like just enjoy it, enjoy all the flavors, enjoy having this time for yourself where you're just nourishing your body but also your mind because you're enjoying this little meal so much. Another thing I do to feel more whimsical in my everyday life is that I find these cups or plates that I think are like fairy-like or whimsical. You can find one in a store or at a thrift shop, but the important thing is that a cup or a plate or a bowl that feels whimsical and fairy-like to you. And I want you to maybe use this every day when you drink your tea or your coffee or you eat a meal, and just again, the key word is to be mindful of how that makes you feel, like drinking from this cup, eating from this bowl, whatever, and just have a little moment for yourself and appreciate this experience. It's just something I like to do, like notice objects and their impact on me and how their aesthetic makes me feel. To kind of continue in the same category, a thing that helps me feel whimsical every day is my living space. I really decorate my space to like fit my inner world. Like this raw plank, I love to see the bark, and then I've decorated it with some of my favorite fairy tale books and some plants and little trinkets and crystals. This is a pairing that I feel is really me, but for you it might look totally different. So I want you to think about how you can like decorate your home to feel more whimsical, and it doesn't have to be a whole like a home makeover. It can just get some crystals, go to your, if you have a local crystal seller, or maybe find somewhere online, just get a few crystals. It doesn't have to be expensive. And I think that if you try that, you will feel that your space will be different, and maybe you can over time add more things to it and make it your own little fairy world. For me, dressing a bit whimsically is also a part of feeling closer to my inner fairy. For example, I got this green knitted beanie. For me, that's Fairycore in a nice and subtle everyday way. And maybe you can find something similar for yourself. It can be anything you want it to be. Maybe a t-shirt, a scarf, a pair of gloves, a jacket. Of course, you can find more items if you want to, but you can also just start with one. And here I also recommend like thrifting. I found so many like original pieces when I've been thrifting. To decorate yourself further, I recommend, if you like jewelry, find some Fairycore necklace or pair of earrings that you really like. And of course, I'm going to recommend my own jewelry, but again, you can also find amazing jewelry in thrift stores and other places as well. And yeah, what we've done so far has really been about being mindful in nature, making these everyday rituals for yourself, and decorating yourself and your space as well. But now I want you to see if you can find a new hobby, or perhaps an old childhood hobby that you want to pick up again and kind of relearn something you haven't done in a long time, something that is familiar but also feels new. I did this with jewelry a little over a year ago when I started making jewelry again, because it had been one of my childhood hobbies and something I did like on and off for years. And as soon as I started doing it again, like maybe after a week, I got the idea to start my own like whimsical jewelry business. And it doesn't have to be like, for you, it doesn't have to be something that goes anywhere like business wise. It should just be for yourself. But if you get the idea to turn it into something bigger, then go for it. But the most important thing is to have fun doing something creative, and maybe create something that you feel is whimsical, fairycore, something like that. You can also, for example, start drawing, or maybe get a like fairy tale coloring book. It can be really simple, but the most important thing is that you just have fun and let go, and just like be in the moment crafting something. For me, that's what has, like, through the tough times in my life, that's what has really saved me. Thank you for joining me on this little journey on how to embrace your inner fairy. I hope that all of these little things helped you, or at least helped you think about how you can like bring some whimsy into your everyday life. And let me know what you think in the comments, your experience with trying these things. And yeah, I hope you're having a wonderful day, that you're being kind to yourself. And I'll see you for my next video. I'm not really sure what it's gonna be yet, but I will get an idea soon. Bye, you guys.